I made a mistake. And we're live. Hey, Alexis, how's it going?
Good. Good to be back.
Welcome back, everybody. We missed last week because Bitovi was doing a training. We learned a lot about computer science, and we learned about the upcoming Done.js project. This week, we're going to talk about a web architecture overview. There's something else that I just remembered I wanted to add. Remind me to talk about like how designing RESTful interfaces. I do want to talk a little bit about that. Last week, if you remember, we talked a bit about web application theory. I went through, we're going to get recursive, hold on. Get rid of that. On Toby's blog, I wrote a blog post that we essentially went through that has a lot about what Bitovi, what at least I care about when working on applications, kind of put in this image like a mad person, you know, that crazy guy in the movies who's got a wall filled with, you know, photos of his dead girlfriend and like links to all the mobsters that might have killed her. That's me, but with web application development. So what we're going to do, so this was like a high-level overview of what matters, but what we're going to focus on mostly is this. For the most part, we're going to focus on kind of maybe two parts today, the MV star part and maybe this RESTful part, how we break things down within that. I have an outline that I'd like to show. I can get it. There we go. I have this cool, which I haven't done since like day 2 or since training 2 or 3. I'm going to be using some paper hopefully today to write out how I break applications down. So, but this is my outline, web architecture overview, and this is the all-seeing eye for overview. So we're going to talk about really what MVVM and MVC are essentially, well, especially MVVM and kind of like React's, which Flux architecture, which I say that in air quotes because it's really just a version of MVVM in my opinion. These things are all obsessed with state and organizing state. And a lot what we're going to talk about is how to break down an application into essentially into view models that organize a certain state. And then maybe we'll talk about how to make them communicate, different ways of making your little stateful components talk to each other. So, and then, well, the first thing I'm going to do is show how this kind of works in TodoMVC. I'm also want to add in a little bit of talk about RESTful architecture, about RESTful services and how we design them. And then go through examples. So already in the Bitovi.js training room, hold on one second while I sneeze. Excuse me. I asked for example applications of that we could kind of design out. And people suggested already like Trello and Podio. If I've used the app before, I'll do it. I've never used Podio, so I'll probably do Trello. I'll do a few other example apps that that I've worked with. So let's get started. And the way to get started is with TodoMVC. So Alexis, if you can bring up TodoMVC just so we can go back and forth more easily once I need to not show TodoMVC. So where is my TodoMVC? So this is the TodoMVC application. And you'll notice here that when I check and uncheck a item as being completed, you could see that there's these numbers here change. Let me zoom in a little bit. So as I change my items to be completed, the number of items left changes, and the number of items that I would clear on clearing completed changes. And also if I like click this, if I were to clear the completed, now this goes to one item left. So we talked a little bit about this yesterday. I'm going to kind of go through that same example, but I just wanted to show. I showed another example in Searcher last or 2 weeks ago, but this is another example of you have some sort of state. In this case, this is really model state what you're dealing with, whether your to-do items are complete or not, but you have various representations of that state scattered throughout the application. So what my general process is of designing how an application is, its architecture and how it's going to work out, is figuring out what these what the root state is. What's like the basic kind of what variable would be held that contains the like absolute state of the application, right? So naively, I might think, well, items left. Items left has to be some variable. But in reality, items left is a derived state from how many items are not checked. So the real true state is whether these to-dos are complete or not, right? And same with this. This is getting its information there. So there's another state too, whether the user is on the active or completed. Let me create one more. So wait a second. Where'd it go? Is this broken? Ugh. This is the one I created for a demo purpose, so it's possible that it is
Here, I can get. Do you want the official one?
Not yet. Eventually we'll want to put that one up. But anyways, there's another state which is kind of what page the user is on, and that's also reflected. That's already reflected here. So that's really the state of the application. Is like what's the name of each to do, whether it's complete or not, and then also whether what page the user is on. Now, hopefully what you can see is that there's two very different types of stateful information. Whether a to-do is complete or not, that is, let me refresh the page again. That is, and the name of the to-do, that is very model. That's model data. That's something that's going to be stored in a database somewhere. It's persisted data that's saved. There's also user data or interface data, interface state that represents something that's not going to be saved. It's kind of stored in the URL, but really it's transient. It's not persisted once the user leaves the site. And in that case, this active, completed, and all. So there's kind of different levels of state, and this represents model state, and this represents view model state. But just so you know, a view model will often coordinate with a model to include model state. So the way that I look at it is, let me get back to my page. So new page to write. Often the way that I think about it is when you're organizing your application, there's model data, and then there's that would be like each to do, whether it's complete or not, or something like that. So in our app, it might be something like it might have properties like each to do might have a property like whether it's complete, putting a space, and the to-do's name. And you might be loading a list of these to-dos using the model. And each instance of a to-do will have properties like this. And then there's the view model, which uses the model and often encapsulates the model. Kind of think about it like this. The view model in this case there might be a list of for TodoMVC, there might be a list of to-dos. There might be a list of to-dos, and there's also what page the person's on, which I might just have page. So this might be an object with to-dos, and each to-do is one of these, and then there's the page. And then what we can do in this view model is add helpers, what you do in like something like CanJS, and a lot of, I mean, pretty much every framework works. The details might be different, but what it ends up having to do is the same. With TodoMVC, I can build like a number of to-dos, like active to-dos needing to be completed count based off of the view model's to-dos properties, each to-do's complete property, right? I can create a derived value from this source state. But again, with architecture, I'm always trying to figure out what these things are for every page that I'm working on. It's the big pattern. And in reality, underneath the hood, the view model kind of talks back and forth with the model. View model will request, give me all to-dos, and then when someone clicks a to-do, it'll say, okay, well, I'm gonna complete that, that to-do. It'll do a lot of the interaction with the outside world with the view is through the view model. And the MVVM kind of works like this. So we'll see this in a little bit more in depth. Any comments there, Alexis?
No, that was pretty good.
Okay. So I'm going to kind of repeat a little bit of what we talked about last week in case anybody missed it, just because it's so important. And kind of why it's so important to figure out this what is the real state of your application. Can you see my screen all right, Alexis? So this is a quick repeat, so I'll kind of go through it quickly. This application allow you to search through different social media sites for something, and you would click search, and then it would show you the results, but it would also save your search in the search history. And if you clicked an item in your search history, it would then update what's shown in the search bar up here, and also change the results to match whatever you clicked on over here. So the naive way, everybody always breaks up their application into 3 different parts. But what they do is they would do, everything would be very like functionally driven, where this form would tell, hey, search history, update yourself with this new search, and search results, update yourself with this new search data. And that would create a connection between the search form and search history and results. And search history would have to do something similar when somebody clicked on a search history item. It would have to update the search form and update the search results as well, right? So this kind of created a dependency. Now this, as we said last week, is all right for such a small app like this, but breaks down, you have something bigger. Right? So this has a million different widgets, and if you were to do that, every widget talk to every other widget directly, you would have a big ball of spaghetti. This is n squared, right? If everything has to talk to everything else, this n squared problem, which does not scale for humans at all. So what you do is you figure out what state is shared among all of these things, and you make all of them talk to that kind of state object, and all of them listen and respond to that stateful object, right? This is what would be inside the view model, if you will, that all of them could share. Or in some ways, it's almost like the model of the application that they all talk to. So what would be the shared state? How could I model, like view model this application? So this is tricky. I don't actually know how to break that down any further. I mean, it's just like an instinctual thing for me, at least. I kind of look at the page. Let's see if I can look at it without all the stuff on it, all over it. All right, look at the page and I try to be like, okay, what is everything dealing with? Well, this graph has, what is it? It's got graph data, obviously, for different data points for time, but what does it need that's similar to all of these things, right? This thing is showing, this thing's showing the period. Okay, well, it's 5 days, right? This thing's showing the period as well. That, you know, the matter, whatever the period is here is going to show up here 5 days. This is 5 days apart. However, this includes the actual start date and the end date. And this is showing the percentage change of the period. So it's kind of like a period, but we definitely we know that we're going to need the start date and end date, not just the period, because this actually shows that. Same with the graph, same with this. And we can see also a little bit of additional information that all of these widgets a lot of these widgets would potentially need to know is what stock you're actually looking at, right? Like the ticker number or something like that. So what we do is, again, I design the view model and I'm like thinking, okay, the state of the application is the ticker, whatever the stock that we're looking up, and the start time and end time that we want to display. And then all of these widgets can talk to that, essentially that view model that would be shared. I mean, you could have this is like, in some ways what you have is each one of these widgets in some ways could have their own independent view model if there was other temporary state, but in a lot of ways they could also just share a single view model. So this thing, what would the state of this be? That would be shared everywhere. Well, we can see that there's which search term you're actually searching for really would be the state of the application. What are you searching for, and what types are you searching for? So when you would change this, well, the results needs to change, and a new search history item needs to change, and then this needs to reflect that. So these two widgets can actually change your state, and they can also, and all three of them can respond to it. That's why this one doesn't have a two-way arrow. So this is really what I do for most apps, is like I just start with trying to figure out what is the core, most essential representation of the state of the application, and what can I derive, what do I need to derive from changes in that. So that's it for this, yeah.
If you wanted to read more about this kind of stuff, what Justin is describing, we're using it in terms of composing a UI application, a browser application. But this is really just talking about communication between modules. I'm using very general terms because this could be anywhere. This could be completely on the server side, just in some kind of business logic. But this is all what we refer to as the observer pattern. So if you're looking for something to read about, like really in depth on how this, what Justin's illustrating, it's the observer pattern is what you're looking for.
So, you know, here's the classic MVVM approach, right? Whoops. Hold on. Trying to move the Google Hangout, but I don't think it'll let me. Well, you guys can't see it, but I can see Google's putting its little Google Hangouts is sharing your screen all over what I'm trying to read. I think these arrows, well, there's definitely a two-way arrow between model and view model. I forgot actually what the dotted versus dash mean. I think it means listen to updates in. So in like a CanJS application, you have your view, which looks like a template, and it can call methods on the view model. We make it so you can also call directly to the model, if you will. Like you can call destroy on a to-do just fine. But in general, there's this view model object, and the view communicates back and forth with that. So when the view model changes, the view will automatically reflect to update. And this is pretty standard. When you hear the terms live binding, this is what that means. Let me show an example of that actually in TodoMVC. Just some basic live binding. Let me get Tana back here. Or actually, I'll use Sublime. One second while I open this up. Oops. Okay. Okay, so here I have, I'm just want to start with some dummy. Okay, so here I've just got a version of jQuery CanJS loaded, and I'm just going to use this here as like an example of MVVM, and just kind of show how different components can work together to create MVVM with CanJS. So this is the dummy HTML for my page. I'm actually going to just stick that into a template, which is CanJS's version of a view. So I'm just going to create, let me see if I have stash here. I do. Good. Here I'm creating a Here I'm just creating a little placeholder for my template. I'm going to load that template and put it in a app. Oh, I already have an out element. Here it is. So I'm going to load that view with can.view, and I'm going to give it the ID. I'm going to give it the ID of the element that I want to treat as a view, and I can pass it data. And I'm going to stick that in out using jQuery. Okay, so now this is not going to be very exciting. We're just going to see an empty application, but we will make it really exciting in a second. This is to do working. What did I do with my window?
I'm excited.
Good. All right. Here it is. To working. Okay. Making sure this is actually my thing. All right. So, okay. Let's make this a little more lively by actually putting in some to-dos. So here's the data that my view is rendered with, which could be called its view model, right? I want to change the view model to actually list some to-dos in it. So I'm going to put some to-dos, and I'm going to list 2 to-dos. I'm going to say this one's ID 0, and it's got a name, and I'll do dishes, and then I'll do another one that's ID 0 or ID 1, and name walk dog. Now, what my view can do is go through all of those. Actually, I'm going to separate. I'm going to call this view model. View model. I've got this object right here. So I'm passing my view model to my view and putting it in the page. Now I'm going to instead of oh, I need completed state here. Let me add that to each one as well. Each one's going to have complete. Oops, that's not what I did. It's going to be completed. The other is not going to be. And what I can do here is go through each to-do. We call it to-dos. I'm going to go through each to-dos into my view model. And for each one, I'm going to, I need this editing if it's complete. We're going to ignore that. Well, I'll do it right now. So we're going to add later to our view model to let us know if a particular to-do is being edited. But I don't have it right now. But I want to be able to do something like this. If it's editing the current to-do, then we want editing. Alexis, if you can send me a link to updated versions of Can jQuery.js and Can Stash, I would appreciate it.
Gotcha.
Just because I have a feeling I'm going to do something that is only works in later versions. I'm right now using, let's see what version I'm using. 2.1.2, which isn't so bad, but if you can give me a 2.3 pre, I would really appreciate it. So I can just go to the link and copy and paste it in. So what I really want to do is put in the name or the value. So here's do the dishes. Instead, I'm going to put in the actual name. And then where's the checkbox? Oh, I write in the class name here. So if it's completed, if my to-do is complete, I'm going to write completed. Oh, and I need this is editing actually goes up here. It goes up with it. So if it's complete, we're going to write completed, and otherwise we're going to write and also, if it's editing, we're going to put in editing. And this is with handlebars template syntax. So with that, I'm going through each to-do, creating a live for it. What? How did that happen? Okay. I don't need the rest of this. Now, if I refresh my page, hopefully I can see.
You need a closing each, Justin.
Oh, thank you.
Also, you have the latest links in your Hangout chat. For those following along, if there's anything that looks, I know we're going, maybe you haven't seen some of this. I know we're doing some specific stuff with Mustache. If you haven't seen Mustache before, feel free to ask any and all questions in our Gitter chat room. It's gitter.im/Bitovi/JS-training. I'm keeping an eye on that chat room as we go through this.
Awesome. Make make this so it's not the full screen here. Okay, there we are. Okay, so with that, I should be able to go to my application, and then now we should see do the dishes twice. I must not have updated the name, written the name right. check here. Where did, oh, here's the do the dishes. Let me put the name back in. Save it. Okay, so now I have dishes and walk the dog. It's not checked because I didn't make the is check completed. Must not be working right. I'll look into that in a second. But the most important thing right now is you can see dishes, and this one is actually checked through, is checked of our view model. We've taken our view model and passed it to the view. Now, I actually have our view model here. You can see it's an object. What you really want is if this state changes, the page updates automatically. Now, every framework provides some way of accomplishing this. When a change in the view model happens, the view updates itself. With Angular, it is dirty checking, looking for when changes in this object happen, and if it happens, it's automatically updating the page. And Angular can do it with normal JavaScript objects. With React, anytime you make a change, you programmatically say, hey, this has changed, update the view model. With CanJS and Ember and Knockout, there's a different way, which is we use observables so that the view can detect when the observable has changed and update the view model, or update the view automatically. So here, to use CanJS's version of observable, I'm going to create a new, so that the view can change automatically, I'm going to do a new can map. Now this is my view model. So now, if I save this, you can see some cool behavior. So I have my view model. Now I can change, I can get my view model, I can get each of my list of to-dos using this with CanJS. To read your observable data, you use this after. You can't just, unfortunately, you can't just write to-dos, although you actually can, you're not supposed to. You write after to-dos, and I can get my list of to-dos, and if I wanted to pop the first item off, remove the first to-do from my list of to-do, if I do that, you can see, actually remove my last one, you can see that the view updated automatically. So I don't have to worry about going in on every state change and updating the DOM. That pretty much happens automatically. Now, this gets very cool when you are dealing with derived data. So here you can see I have 2 items left and clear completed. I want to make those work so that whenever I change my items, well, suddenly these things will update themselves as well. So I'm going to need to create a much more of a view model-y view model. So to do that, instead of creating just a dummy kind of observable object, I'm going to actually create a view model constructor function that will have methods on it like completed. So I can create a to-do view model, and I'm going to extend can map. And I'm going to add a method that is called completed count. And what this is going to do is have a count, and it's going to go through each to-do, each of the to-dos, and for each one that's complete, it's going to, wait, do we want to show completed or incomplete? Hold on a second. we want to show the number of items left. We want to show incomplete count. So I'm going to change that to incomplete. You really need both for the full application. We're just showing one small part. So we're going to show incomplete count. We're going to go through each to-do, and every time a to-do is not complete, we're going to increment count. So if it's not complete, we're going to increment count. And then we're going to return the value of count. So that's my to-do view model. Now I want to create, instead of a can map, I'm going to create one of a to-do view model, but pass it my to-dos. Oh, if you could give me the define plugin too, that would be awesome. Because I do want to show, I guess I'll probably, well, I can do it without the define plugin, so maybe not. So here's my to-do view model. This is the definition of it, so it has these helper methods. And then I can use these helper methods in my page here. So the number of items left is incomplete count. And now I will look at my page here. And I did something wrong. What if to-dos? Hold on, let me see what's going on here. It looks fine. This dot each to-dos. If someone is on HipChat trying to tell me what's going on, they should tell Alexis because I'm not paying attention.
No, that's just the general chat.
Okay. Let's see what I did wrong here. It's an array of to-dos. Why is to-dos an array? That's fine. It should go each to-dos. Should hit that, hit the list. And then callback, why is callback not a function? That's what's weird. What was callback? Let me take your, this is maybe a good one to get the, use can each. Well, this is incomplete. Oh, I implemented this incorrectly. Oh, whoops. Duh. Okay, I did this stupidly. Okay, this is supposed to be after. I actually have to get my to-dos and then that each them. There you go. So let me refresh this. Okay, cool. So now I have items left. Let me see what's going on here. Incomplete. Incomplete count. Definitely getting red. Count equals 0 count. Why is that not working? Yay, live demos. Here we go. Let's try it again. I think it's because I saved it. Let's see what the problems. See if it's actually getting a value. That should be 1. It is 1. Why is it not putting it in the page? It's where'd you put those updated versions, Alexis?
They're in your chat. Just open the chat on the top left of your screen. No. Top left of your screen in the Hangout.
Cool. Keep those. Slash. Okay. Try it again. All right, yay, that fixed it. Okay, cool. So, all right, back to what I was originally saying. The nice thing about this is that if I pop the items off, this changes automatically, right? So I can define a view model with functionality, like with methods and functionality that is derived from the actual state of the application. Now, this to-dos here, this is just made up data. Really, this should be coming from a model. So what in CanJS, what you would do without the define plugin, typically you do this with the define plugin, which makes this a lot easier, is you would create a model that allows you to load, create, update, read and destroy to-dos. So I'm going to do that. I can create a to-do, and I'm going to do can model extend, and I can give it a place to find all to-dos. And normally what you would do is give it a place like to-dos on the server, but I'm going to make it so it just calls a function, and I'm just going to have that function provide the to-dos so that I don't have to implement a server. So find all always needs to return a promise. So I'm going to do use jQuery's promise, and I'm going to resolve it with the data that I want. So it's going to resolve with this data here. Okay. So now I want my view model to use my model. There's a lot of better ways of doing this if you're using the define plugin, but I can do it decently simply with the in an init. So when this view model is created, it's going to use the model to get all to-dos from the model, from the server. And when that happens, it's going to add those to-dos as the to-dos property of the view model. This is how we add that property. I'm gonna say, hey, my to-dos for my to-dos property, really my state is are the to-dos loaded from the model. Now, this needs to work a little bit differently because there won't be any to-dos initially when we pass the view model to the page. So I need to just change this to be a little bit safer and make sure that there are, in fact, to-dos. Now, with that, now I just create a view model and pass it to the view. Everything should work the same. Cool. So that's in general like a lot of what you're doing. I'm not showing how you connect different view models to each other. Every framework kind of has a different way of doing that. With CanJS, essentially you use can component to, every component has a view model, and you use custom elements to wire up your different view models. But in general, most frameworks, a lot of technology, it's the same. You're kind of defining this stateful object somewhere, and then different parts of the view get that, or the view gets that and updates accordingly. So there's no questions about that. I'm going to move on to actually like identifying, you know, what view models should look like for different applications and breaking it down.
You'll notice if you're not used to this kind of pattern, I know a lot of newer frameworks do this similar thing, but if you're used to just using jQuery, a lot of times you'll have maybe like an incomplete count helper or something where it pushes items onto a list, but you're actually modifying the DOM yourself. That's what we really focus on, is not having to worry about that kind of stuff at all, just setting properties on objects. It makes things a lot easier to maintain and a lot more testable.
Yeah, you never want to be updating. You try to avoid updating the DOM yourself as much as possible. And yeah, just always let the view do that, and you update the essentially the state of the application.
Yep.
Cool. So let's open up. If you can, Alexis, do you have a Trello account? You want to open the?
Yeah, let me open it up real quick.
You can do the open source Trello that we use. So we can show how to break down Trello. And if other people have suggestions on things we could show how to build, please just share them. So let's talk about the functionality. I don't know what, you know, I don't know. There's a lot of ins and outs of Trello that I'm sure I don't know. But in general, there's, you know, there's a bunch of different, I forgot what these things are called. They are called lists. There's lists, and there's cards within lists, and you can move cards, you know, order them amongst themselves, and also move them between different lists. And then you can click a card, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that you can do within a card. And you can see here that when you open a card, you know, the URL changes as well. It goes back when you're on your thing. So let's talk about, let's break down the model. Maybe we'll break down the services if we can, or maybe I'll come back to that after this. And then we'll break down the view model as much as possible. So Alexis, you got this kind of open too?
I do.
Awesome. So we'll kind of navigate back and forth between Alexis and my piece of paper. So piece of paper out. All right. And this is a really good exercise to do with your team and take pictures of after you're done, and because I think it just helps people understand overall how things are working. So, all right. So here's probably how I would do it. Clearly, you're going to have your lists, right? So right, each one of these is a list. So your models, let's talk about we'll kind of do this all over the place, but maybe clean it up when we're done. So your models, right, you would have a list model, probably a card model. You probably have users too, but there's a lot of times I have a session model for every single page. Like there's an actual session. You can create a session, and a session belongs to a user. But I'm just going to list the models. We'll kind of go about their details. I'm sure there's a user model for all the different users. There's a session. Session have 3 S's like that? Session? I don't know. I'm a horrible speller. I can only spell for, then, and other like programming related words. If, I'm a really good speller of if. Okay, so we can break that down in a second. Let's talk about the view model. Really, I think this is, for the most part, a very simple view model. I'm sure there's the app view model, which is kind of like the highest, the biggest view model. I think is really simple. I think it's just which card are you looking at, right? Because that's all I can see. And if people know Trello better than that, I mean, there's like the menu, if the menu's shown, so we can include that. I don't know, Alexis, if you want to show, like, hey, the menu popping out.
Which menu?
Show menu on the top right.
Oh, okay. Just my, oh, show menu.
No, not that one, but yeah, there's that one. I guess there's the Alexis or Brill menu. All those things would have, so the high-level view state would have like there would be a high-level one which would have like your lists loaded from your models. It would have probably the session. It would have little flags like, is the menu, like menu showing? Menu, I'm just going to write menu out. And any other kind of little menu thing. It's possible that this actually represents something. This represents a board, I guess. So maybe there's a board model, because I think that star in private, I'm going to kind of sneak this in here. Board. There's a board model. Yeah, there's a board in that. Okay, so most of the stuff is model based here, and the view model would be it wouldn't have the lists really. I think it would really have the board. This actually reminds me a lot of the board that you have. Let me cross that out. Make board. Probably actually like the board ID really, and then it would have a board. So this actually reminds me a lot of like what I'm doing for this basketball app that I'm making. I can talk about real quick how I might structure the high level like application view model with like the define plugin of CanJS. But let me keep going down and breaking this down a little bit. So because what you really want is you want to load your board and then make so that your board loads all the different lists. And then each list is going to load its card. The tricky part might be a little bit with the card, because order is important. What I always do for maintaining order is, let's break this down a little bit. I'm going to talk about what, move this up here. Let's talk about what would be in kind of the card view model. or card model, right? All the different properties. There's going to be probably a board ID. And I'm doing it very like, I'm doing this very restfully, or like very, what's the term for databases that are like no duplicated data. What's that term?
You're not talking about relational, are you?
Well, it's a relational database, yeah, but it's when there's like no duplicated data. Like everything is, it's like absolutely pure. I forgot what that's called, but I'm doing it that way, if you know what I'm talking about. Where basically, I don't have like the board row having each card in it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not doing like a Mongo database kind of thing either. I'm doing just a pure like relational database kind of layout. But anyways, a card would have a board ID. And then it's going to have, let's open up oh, Alexis already has opened up a card. This is going to have a whole thing in of itself. We'll break down a card later if we have time, like what's going on inside of a card. It wasn't unique or indexed. It's something else. I forgot the term. We'll go. Cards probably have all this other type, like comments, and comments belong to a card. Checklist can belong to a card. There's all this other stuff that can obviously belong to a card, but we'll ignore that. But let's just talk about the outer world of a card, which is the position. It's probably gonna have a position. Now, the interesting thing about position. So Alexis, can you close your this, right? So just rearrange two cards if you don't mind. So he just rearranged two cards. Now, the hard part is if you try to have like CanJS Getting Started Guide, its position is 0, and then 2.1 Model Docs, its position is 1, CanConnect Homepage, its position is 2, and so forth. If Alexis were to change like getcanjs.com SSL and move that to the front of the list, that means every single position value would have to change.
Mm-hmm.
That's terrible. So what I tend to do in situations like this is remember that there's an infinite number of numbers between every two numbers. So what you can do is, well, of course you can't represent those in, a floating point. There are limitations, but limitations I don't think most users are going to ever hit. So instead what I have is position is some floating point number. And Mohammed, I think, is the person who asked this question. Mohammed, if you want to direct me to some part of this application, to talk about its architecture a little bit more, please guide me, because I'm really just talking about how to, most of this is model layer. I'm not really going to be talking about view model, but your models are very important. Anyway, so position, I would probably have it as like a floating point number, right? So some decimal number. And what I would do is, let's say, I would just give them all a starting number. Like the first card you put in, let's create a card and place my order, Alexis, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So here's my position numbers. But so, okay, Alexis just created an example card. I would make that position 0 and then create another card. And then create a third card. Just one, yeah, third. So a sample card would be 0, a second sample card would be 1, a third sample card would be 2. You're always just incrementing by 1. But now let's say you moved a third sample card in between a sample card and a second sample card. I don't want to send a server update to every single, to 2 of these items. I just want to update the one that's been updated, that's been moved. So I would actually make that 1.5 its position. And then yes, if you move a second sample card back into its original spot, well, you could be a little tricky in this case, because you could see that, you could do one of two things. You could see that, we're kind of setting it back So it's actually possible for us to just make a second. So can you set it to what it was when it was messed up?
Sure.
So we could do two things when a second sample card moves into that spot. If you're really clever, we could say that, oh, well, we can just make a third sample card. We'll actually just change the position of that one, even though we're moving a second sample. We could just change the position of the third to back to 2 and leave second so change it from 0.5 to 2. Instead of making a second sample card, the other way, if you're just doing it naively, would be say a second sample card is now going to be 0.25, and we'll leave a third sample card as 0.5. Right? So you can always just go like halfway in between. And this just saves on a lot of updates, and you leave the client to kind of sort them by that number. It's a really good way of kind of maintaining order efficiently. So anyways, a card is going to have a board ID, and then a list, oh, sorry, not a board ID, sorry, a list ID. And a list is going to have a board ID. And you can kind of see how these all add up. Now, this gets us to how to load this page efficiently. Alexis, refresh your page if you don't mind.
Will do.
So you can see how when Alexis refreshes his page, everything is already there. What you don't see is like open source showing first, and then the name of every, so the name of the board showing first, and then the name of every list showing first, and then the name of every card showing up, right? You don't have this kind of cycle where you would see like at a requests, like you would see first a request to like board. Let me write in a different color here for my services. We will do let's do purple for services. You don't see a request like going to boards /2, that request completing, and then going, and then multiple requests for every single, or no, you would get boards, but you could also at the same time, if you knew 2, because your view model would really have board ID. So you would request your board, and at the same time, you could also be requesting your lists. So you get the board name. You could also, if you were being very restful and breaking everything down, you would also see like another request like lists for that are board ID equals 2. Right, you could see another potential request going out for that. So this would get all the boards, and then once these were all done, you would see another series of a lot of requests, each one for all the cards for each list that was retrieved. So if this got 3 lists back, you would see another request potentially for cards for list ID equals 2, and then cards list ID equals 3, and so forth, right? This is what can happen if you need relational data and you don't have services that can pull back that relational data for you. what I tend to do is, and this is, I think we might have talked about it a little bit ago, you can send as an optional parameter to most of your REST services to bring in related data. So what I would want to say in boards is bring in the lists and also bring in each list's cards. So instead, the request here for boards 2 might actually look more like boards 2, but then say like include, and then it might say lists, and then might also have lists dot cards. So when I'm building an application though, I'll actually a lot of times start building it this way, just because I want my RESTful services to be so straightforward and easily maintainable that I'll actually build the app this way at first. And then later, when I really care about performance, it's easy, relatively easy to kind of add this to the service so that this data can come in quick. You know, I'm always about, this is nice because you never know if there's a use case where like, well, you actually start with just only viewing one list, and then you want to get the cards for just one list. You need a service like this for that. So I always start with, you know, services for everything that'll work in like any situation, and then start adding in kind of special behaviors that allow me to load more information as I want. And there's this, let's share this link on how we a lot of times design our RESTful interfaces. Look for REST relational algebra. It's just this gist I put out where kind of what I expect, how to kind of do those things. So, you know, what your service layer should kind of look like for certain conditions. Like, oh, if I wanted to get tasks for a related field and I didn't know the owner ID, so I can write owner.name, and I just try to make it very uniform how you can request data, and then say like, oh, include, you know, some related field is often how I do it. And then people have some other ideas. So this, Alexis can probably make sure we add to the blog so people can check this out.
Sure.
So
you're sharing the gist, right?
Yeah, talk about the gist. Okay, so that's, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what else people would want to talk about with Trello. I don't know if Mohammed asked for some other advice. It's actually, you know, the data there is most of the work, I think. It's just to get your services lined up so you can get data. The view model is mostly pretty simple because, like, you know, I probably would structure it with, there'd be the overall view model, which is just like, is there a board ID, and is there, actually let me rewrite this. There would be, the overall view model is going to be, let me write my revised view model. Oh, let me, actually so you can see it. My revised view model, besides the menu out and stuff like that, there would be two primary things. There would just be the board ID and then the card ID. And I would simply, if you go back, show the app again, Alexis.
Sure. I'll share my screen again. I'll switch to yours.
I would simply, so when board ID is there, you know, when board ID changes, you're essentially just going to get a new board and change all that, and the list would redraw and everything. You'll make sure that the request to get all the board and its data happens, and yeah, you redraw every list and every board. When card ID changes, well, then you just add that modal. So if you hit a card, Alexis,
Sure.
you would be setting in your view model state this card ID, and then you have some logic that would say, oh, when this changes, make sure the modal is present. If this has a value, make sure the modal is present, and if it doesn't have a value, remove the modal. So that's basically how I make this work. Anything else that you think we should talk about in this app?
I think that's pretty good. I think that's...
So what else would you want to build, Alexis, if you could? It's complex.
What would I want to build
Yeah.
that's complex? Oh, I feel like I use, in all my trainings, those have attended, I use Gmail as a really common, it's something that everybody uses. They're familiar with the interactions on how to set that up from a small scale.
Yeah. Someone just asked that they asked us to build the to-do app with components. We actually have, if we can make sure Alexis shares in the follow-up where you can see that. But if you, I think actually if you look at the TodoMVC implementation of CanJS, it shows it built with components.
I just dropped the link in there. Take the TodoMVC with a grain of salt. When we build those types of apps, for TodoMVC, there's specifically a lot of restrictions. They want you to use your framework, but in a certain fashion without too many other tools. When you're actually building your own application for yourself or for your company, typically you'll use things like module loaders. You'll be able to abstract code in a slightly better architecture. So
we'll not put it all in one big file.
Yeah, exactly. TodoMVC, we kind of have to do certain things a certain way. That's not actually how we would really build it, but we can't use Steel and TodoMVC because that breaks their requirements.
Yeah, I would say for an app that small, it's actually okay not to use, Steel and whatnot, because it is so. I mean, it could all be in one file if that was the only thing you were ever going to.
It's true, but it's also there's two sides, because people will take that as an inspiration. Like, you always want to say, even if this is a very small application, if you know how to build a large application differently, that's okay. But if someone's just looking at this to set up, to use it as a template for a larger architecture, that doesn't scale. So that's just me prefacing our example on TodoMVC. A word of caution.
So do you want to do a Gmail, how we would do Gmail, or do you want to do something? I want to do one more. I want to do one more app. We can do this. We can do another simple one.
Yeah.
Do you have that design thing open? That design PowerPoint?
Oh, let me see. I just closed it, actually. Open that up.
We can do this one, I'm thinking. It's a pretty basic one.
Which one? Let me see. Oh, okay.
Oh, actually, even I like this one even. This one's good. Well, yeah, this one's interesting. Do you have that?
Yes.
So let's talk about how to break down this app. This is something we built a long time ago. It's very ugly, but there's a lot going on here. It can be a little tricky to identify all the different parts and figure out how to make it work. And also, I think that this breaks down a little bit, because I think what people forget about in the kind of with view models, people will actually get carried away with view models and state. There are some things that you want that are pure kind of DOM utilities or helpers that I think people forget about, is making those, because everything they want to translate to state. For instance, one of our applications was kind of like this, and that as you scrolled, they wanted to have a notification for when, like on each element, it would like know the ID and have to load additional information at that point. Like, you know, there was an image or something related that it was we only wanted to load it when it was actually becoming visible to the user or about to become visible.
Oh, hold on, Justin. You mind if I interrupt for a second? There's a few questions that we missed in the training chat.
Okay.
How do you decide to use CanView adder or stash mustache helper?
That's kind of a long question that's not super related to architecture, not at least the architecture level that we're talking about here. Helpers are for kind of whether you want to render some sub-template or not. CanView After is more like, do you want to decorate an element with some behavior? To me, they do very different things, is when I use them for. So if I'm trying to like make some element add some additional behavior, like, oh, I want a date pick, this input to use a jQuery date picker on it, well, then I'll use CanView After. Or another example is like, what I want is this element here, when it's scrolled, to add like trigger on sub elements when they're scrolled into view. Like, that's a behavior. I would use a CanView After for that. But for helpers, those are really just like, you know, if a lot of times it's for kind of view model-y related stuff. If this condition is met, render this sub-template. Then I use helpers. That's kind of how I see it. Was there another question, or?
No, it just looks like there's a discussion. If you guys have questions about where to find CanJS documentation, feel free. Let us know what you're looking for specifically, if there's anything we can assist out. Obviously, there's the CanJS Gitter chats, but feel free. If there's something you're looking for specifically, let us know.
Yeah. Okay, so what I was talking about is that there are a class of things that you should build often that are pure DOM related, because you got to remember that the DOM has state, right? Where I've scrolled to is really maintained by this scroll bar. Now, some people will pull that into like the state of the actual application, which sometimes is appropriate. But a lot of times, I think it's easier from the developer's perspective to make kind of pure DOM related widgets. Things like what I was saying, like, oh, maybe I create a widget that I can add to this element that as I scroll the element, it triggers custom events on these sub-elements for when they're scrolled into view. That's actually, those kind of things can be quite useful. Another example might be a widget that keeps the table header locked in position with the table body and allows a table body to scroll under a table header. So the first thing that I'm going to do in this presentation is really to break down the different widgets you'd want to build, and then we'll talk about the view model state, or the state that would actually be able to link them together. So the way that we built this is you'll have a bunch of different, so you can notice this page, this thing has a bunch of different pagination widgets, right? So there's a one type of paginator widget up on top. another type of paginator widget, another type of paginator widget, another type of paginator widget. All right, so here's 3 paginator widgets, and I will get another piece of paper out. What the view model should look like for all of these paginator widgets and pretty much be shared by them would be something like this. You would have a three bits of information for pagination. It can always be a little tricky to get the 3rd bit, but you would have your offset, you'd have your limit, and your count. So let's say I was paginating through 1,000 items. And then eventually I had 1,000. Whoa, that's not 1,000, that's 10. It's because I wanted to write 10 here. And then I'm going to write 11. And then actually, I need a 9 here. And then I'll have like 19, 20, 21, So what, you can have different names here. Maybe there's start index, end index, and count. You can also have limit and offset. What offset means is like the position where what items you were showing. And then limit is how many items you want to show. So if I was at 0, I might have offset as 0. If I want to show 10 items at once, I might have 10. And that means I'm showing items 0 through 9. And the count is how many total items you have. So with that, you can see with this state right here, you can actually have everything you need to power all of these widgets, right? So, yeah.
Apparently, can you click your Bitovi screen? Apparently, everybody sees my camera. They can't see your screen.
Okay.
I have yours selected, but on my admin panel shows your screen is selected, but everybody's saying they see my face.
All right. Well, now hopefully they see me. If not, let us know. So I'll just repeat. So offset, limit, and count. Offset is where you're starting the range from. Limit is where you're ending at. And count is how many total items. So you would need all 3 of these things for all of these pagination widgets. So this is, again, this is like the state that I try to figure out what's going to be used for each one. And if I go back to the, oh, well, I was trying to talk about this and was showing my presentation. Sorry. Again, offset is where you are, limit how many you want to show, count how many total. And with that, you can show, you can power all of everything that these widgets need to do. They will all communicate through that shared state object. So you can see that, like, this has page 1 of 3, and it knows how many total records there are. That's the count. Page 1 is really, if you think about it, that's the what you need to do is take the count, or how many total pages you have. That's really the count divided by the limit. So it looks like we're showing 100 items here. So that means there's 3 total pages. The limit would be 100. This ends up being 3 different pages. You can derive what's shown here from your kind of raw offset limit count data. Similarly, this, and they all have different controls that would change. This doesn't actually change limit and offset, but all these other ones would essentially change the offset when people use these. So that's one part of the application. The next thing I built to do this is I built, and now you can find a lot of these that help you do this, but back when I built this, I needed something that could keep a table header, its position, allow a table body to scroll under a table header. So I called that scroll table, and I built that. That's pure DOM, right? Because it's all based upon the state of where you're scrolling and the dimensions of these DOM elements. I don't think that that is necessary, like the dimensions of these things, to bring into like a observable, a CanJS observable or something like that. It's okay to make pure DOM widgets. They're very useful for other projects and things like that, because then you don't have to have some kind of weird, something figuring out what the positions of these things are, setting some state, and then this thing listening to that state change and adjusting the widths of the table header cells accordingly. Not needed. I think that's overkill. You also need to be able to sort the table, and so I just made something that did that, a sortable widget, similar to scrollable table. This needed to be selectable, so every element, like I could actually click an element, it would gain focus, and then I could hit the down arrow key and it would move focus from one element to the next. So again, this is a pure DOM style widget. I created something that listened to when an element had focus, and when you hit the key down arrow would find the next element in the page that was focusable and call focus on that. And again, this is pure DOM widgetry, right? Fine, that's okay to do that kind of stuff. Then finally, I created a message component, and this just consumed a message ID property that this would change. So there's the actual list manager. This would use the model to load. The list manager would use the model to load messages given the current pagination information. So this would be passed essentially the offset limit count object, and then use the message model to load this data and also set up all of these other selectable and scrollable table widgets. And when anybody clicked on a message, it would change the message ID, which would therefore update this. And then finally, there's this other widget that would maintain like the heights of all of these things. So if the page dimensions changed, it would make sure that like everything was sized appropriately, because it couldn't be done with CSS, not back when I wrote this at least. So that was this page. Cool. All right. I think that's good for now. I think we might redo another one of these. If people have other apps that they would like to see broken down, or something that you're working on and you would like to know how it's made, it's a really good question to ask at the end of any of these trainings. Right? Like, how do I do this? Bring a screenshot of your application and we will break it down. But I think that's it for this week, unless there's questions on Gitter.
No additional questions at the moment.
Cool. Did you ever work on this, Alexis, or is this before your time?
This was just before my time.
Cool.
By a couple months. Hold on, we get one thing. We built like this photo, shows use steal or require JS load those components together. Yeah, I think that's a good. Maybe that's something we could do for a blog post. How we would really do TodoMVC free of any TodoMVC.com restrictions. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah. So one thing I'm working on that's not ready yet. So there's two. You can look at if you really want to see how we do things. There's one app that's pretty much already ready. If you really want to see it, which is CanJS. Place my order. This is a really good example of how we'll write things with need permission. This is public, if that's what you mean, Kiwi. Should be public. Pretty sure it is. Let me know if it's not. This is a really good example of a very basic application that how we'd write it and how we'd break everything down into its own own file, and how we create tests for it and things like that. And then I'm working on an even more complex application, which is going to be here, which is helping me manage tournaments, so I can create different players. It's got a lot of CRUD behavior to it and a much more complex view model. So it knows little things like this, where once I pick a player, then you'll notice John Brady is gone. Chris Marshall I can no longer select. Little things like that. And then once I create a team, I can't assign someone who's already been assigned a team. And there's a whole YouTube kind of integration with it. This is going to be a much more complex app that's going to be written how I think things should be written, but it's still a work in progress. Hopefully I'm going to get much further in it this week. That's at Done.js Bitballs. This actually does deal with relationships and things like that, and has a node service layer in it. All of the I might be very lazy and not add tests and stuff like that, even though I really should. But because I think I'm the only person who's ever going to work on it, I think it's more or less all right. But this does some stuff like, where is this? Details. This does some interesting things, especially around relational data. So when you load a tournament, like in that one page, you go to the tournament details page. A tournament has games and it has teams, and there's actually players for each team that I need to be able to show. This kind of thing is done, I think, potentially what could be very nicely done. I didn't totally complete it. How to handle related data, but there's a really good pattern that I kind of stumbled upon here that I will love to go into some other time. But we're already at an hour and a half. But this is another thing you could look at. So Kiwi suggested how to organize large apps such as this. Oh, so this is a good example. We could do this maybe next time. Someone would have to walk me through, maybe we could pull someone into the actual room next. Let's plan on next week after this. If this is something that you guys want to go through, Kiwi, if you want to come and join us in the room just so you can actually walk me through the functionality here, because I think there's a lot going on and I just need someone to explain what each part does. Some of this just seems like an example app, and this isn't like a real app. I can't tell. Maybe not. Orders, visits. A lot of this is just getting data, right? I mean, we built, by the way, Bitovi builds this kind of stuff all the freaking time. I mean, I would say half the apps we build are dashboard apps like this, where there's a ton of customization that you can do, which it seems like this is also trying to provide. Yeah, for the most part, it's just always figure out your state, right? And then you build everything to consume some part of that state. Yeah. Cool. Anything else? So why don't you just rebuild the to-do app based on this? I don't know what you mean by this necessarily, unless that's your link that you're trying to share. Um, the reason why we won't build it based off that is because it's just unnecessary, at least for TodoMVC to like actually have a different list item widget. I mean, we could do it that way. There's just, because the app itself is so simple and like clear completed, I mean, we could do a status bar. It's just, it's not necessary because clear completed, all of this is the way that we've done it. It's just so simple. And I don't want to make CanJS seem more complex, really. A lot of people use TodoMVC as like a way to like put their toes in the water of whatever framework they're looking at. And I would be afraid of pulling apart the app so much that it became wonky to look at. If someone else wants to like maintain this and build this, I'd happily like build it with somebody else and kind of give my advice on how I would split these things. But I wouldn't want to do that as like CanJS's, go to TodoMVC example app that most people would look at coming from the TodoMVC application. Yeah. But I think, so also, if you are into CanJS or whatever, then looking at the Done.js guide, it's coming together. We're hopefully 3 weeks away from releasing this. If you want, this doesn't talk about necessarily the architecture side of things, but just like how to put things in their own little worlds, the modlet approach. This really gets into all of that and includes how to set up server-side rendering, how to work with Can Connect and the new model layer and that kind of stuff. You can always walk through this, and this will at least set you up for everything but the architecture. Because architecture is different for every single application, and it's one of those things where you just instinctually have to see a bunch of different apps, start looking at what do you think the state is for each one of them, and seeing how to connect them. And I just don't know another way besides, just people bringing us their apps and saying like, oh, this is how we would do it. So we can work on this one next week if we have time. Although I should have time, we could probably actually do it because I'm actually giving, if anybody is in Chicago and wants to stop by a training, if they're using CanJS, I can probably make that happen. Because I'm doing a training next week. Cool. Anything else, Alexis? Anything else? Gitter?
I think we're good, but that's a good point. If you're in any, I know Bitoviagons run or are prominent members of a lot of local meetups all around the globe at this point. So there's probably someone nearby. If you're in one of the major cities, I know Chicago's huge for Bitovi, Dallas, I'm always there at the meetups. If you have questions on CanJS and are in the same city as us, you can probably just come up to us at one of the meetups. So
yeah, so
try to make sure yourselves as available as possible.
Is next week a very biased framework comparison?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Next week's training?
Let me see. I'm not sure if next week, I believe next week is Steel.
Oh, it is Steel. You're right. And then, okay. So next week we'll be talking about the dependency management solutions.
Mm-hmm. There was a lot of questions in the Gitter today, like how to use a module loader. So stay in for next week. Oh, I was just on that part of the globe. If Kiwi said you were in Italy, I was just in that neighborhood.
Oh, really?
Last month.
Oh, yeah. Someone else is going there too. I forgot who.
I don't know if I know Italy kind of shares a border. They share a border with Slovenia, but if you're ever in any of the meetups in Eastern Europe, I know we have one of our teams in Zagreb, and they speak a ton at the local JS conferences and meetups. So if you're in that neighborhood too. Zagreb, Croatia.
Mohammed asked, I asked how to design a view model for a little load more component with click event or window scroll. So load more component with click event. So I'm not exactly, what really helps me, if you guys, for next time, if you can show me an example visual. I'm just really bad without like seeing what the app is supposed to look like. But this is a great place, by the way. Like if you just have, if you're like, hey, how would you build this? And you can get approval from who's ever asking you to build it to share it, like the mock-up or whatever. Just paste it in the training room, and then we will definitely get to it next time. I mean, honestly, we, during these times, can help you build your whole application if you can get us the designs before you actually have to start writing the code for it. I would love it if we could help people that way, because we can really, I think, shorten the amount of time it takes to design something. So a little load more component. See that? Like I don't know if that would have a view model. A lot depends, because I guess I'd have to see it working. To me, that feels like one of those pure DOM or mostly pure DOM. Because if it's based upon when someone scrolled, if it's based on when someone has scrolled, then that to me, keep that DOM in the state, just trigger a jQuery event when someone has scrolled, so to load more data or something like that. And then in your view, you can say, well, on visible or whatever, have an on visible event be fired, and then you can just call some method to like show more, add more data. Yeah, Mohammed, just add that. Show me an example, and then we'll talk about it next week after Steele. Cool. Awesome. All right. Thanks everybody for coming. Thanks Alexis for chatting with me, and I will see you guys all next week. Peace.